All right, section 4.6. We have spent some time naming ionic compounds. Now we are going to spend some time naming covalent, or what we call molecular compounds. And there is a difference when we name covalent. There's a difference when we name covalent or molecular compounds in comparison to what we've been doing with ionic compounds. The difference is not much, but it is something that we have to do. I cannot say this enough, you only use these rules that we're going to talk about today when you have two nonmetals. I cannot reiterate that enough. Two nonmetals. All right, see this? Two nonmetals. You only use these rules when we have two nonmetals. Got it? Two nonmetals. If you have a metal, you have to use the rules that we talked about yesterday. You only are going to use these rules when you have two nonmetals. So if you got a metal, you got to use the rules we talked about yesterday. Fair enough. That's what you have to do. If you have a metal, you have to use the rules we have yesterday. Again, one more time. The rules we're going to talk about today only apply to two nonmetals. Cannot emphasize that enough. The rules we're going to talk about today only apply to two nonmetals. Well, where are the metals, Mr. Cleonard? I don't remember where the metals are. Well, let's refresh your memory. Remember that the metals are everything to the left of the steps. So the metals are everything to the left of the steps. The nonmetals are to the right of the steps. So if we have two nonmetals, we're going to have two elements to the right of the steps. So let's go through three examples here. Fe and Cl, is one of those a metal? Fe and Cl, is one of those a metal? Yep. So we're going to use what we did yesterday. We're going to use the naming way we did yesterday. How about the next one? P2O5. Do we have two nonmetals? P2O5. Well, let's look. Phosphorus is to the right of the steps. Oxygen is to the right of the steps. Here's an example of what we'd be naming today with our new rules. Next up, CO. Is carbon to the right of the steps? Yes. Is oxygen to the right of the steps? Yes. Here's another example of an element that we would be naming with today's rules. So two nonmetals is only going to apply to these rules. Well, what are the rules? Let's look at this first. First rule, you're going to name the first element. If you have more than one, you have to use the prefix. And we're going to talk about the prefixes in a second. So if I have one, C, carbon, P, phosphorus. However, if I have two, I'm going to have to use the prefix. All right? So kind of keep that in mind. Now, what are my prefixes? Here are your prefixes. If you have one, mono, 2 equals di, 3 equals tri, 4 equals tetra. And you're like, why would 4 be tetra? You guys ever play a game named Tetris? Tetra is just the word for 4. In Tetris, what's the maximum number of lines you can knock out in one time? 4. So that's why tetra is 4. And penta is 5. So 1 is mono, 2 is di, 3 is tri, 4 is tetra, and 5 is penta. So now we're going to go back to the rule here. You're going to name the first element. If you have more than one, you're going to use the prefix. So if I have one, like in the example, P2, I had more than one, so now I have to use the prefix, diphosphorus. I just named the element. P was phosphorus. 1C. Well, if more than one, you use the prefix. If just one, you leave as is. So what's 1C going to be? Just carbon. All right. P2, I had 2 phosphoruses, so I went diphosphorus. What if I just had 1 P? It would be phosphorus. All right, so that's how you name the first part. Second part, the name of the second element, the ending is changed to "ide." Very similar to what we did. Then you're always going to use a prefix. You're always going to use a prefix. So this time, If the ending was oxygen, you would change it to oxide. If you had 1, it would be monoxide. If you had 2, it would be dioxide. If you had 3, it would be trioxide. And on and on and on and on. So the first rule is you just name the element. If you have more than 1, you have to use a prefix. If you have 1, you just let it be. The second element, you change that ending to "ide," and you have to use a prefix. So let's look at a couple of examples here. How about we do this example? P2O5, we'll do CO2, and what should we have for giggles here? Let's go NO. Alright, so let's look at P2O5. How are we going to name P2O5? Well, remember P2O5, you're going to name the first element. What's the first element? P is phosphorus. If you have more than 1, however, you have to use the prefix. We have more than 1. We have 2 here. So what's the prefix for 2? Di. So we're just going to go ahead. This is going to be diphosphorus. The second element, you're going to change the ending to "ide," so oxygen becomes oxide. Now I have 5 of them, so I have to use the prefix on the second one. So what is the prefix for 5? Penta. Oxygen changed to oxide, so 5 oxygens. It's going to be pentaoxide. Now there's a spelling thing that technically dropped the A, but we're not going to worry about that. So you have diphosphorus pentaoxide. All right, next one. CO2. You guys may know this one already, but let's go through how to name it. Remember, the very first element you just named. So let's C is carbon. And if there's more than 1, you use a prefix. If there's just 1, you name it. Well, we only have 1 carbon, so we're going to go carbon. Next up, O2. You're going to change oxygen to what? You're going to change the ending always to "ide." So oxygen changes to oxide. We have 2 of them. So the prefix for 2 is di. So you're going to go carbon dioxide. Next up, we have NO. NO. Well, remember the rule for the first element is to just name it as is. Well, N is nitrogen. And if you have 1 of them, just let it be. So we have 1 nitrogen, so we're just going to go nitrogen. Then the rule for the second element is you're always going to change the ending to "ide." So oxygen is going to be oxide. I only have 1 of them, so what's the prefix for 1? Mono. So we're going to go monoxide, or what you may refer to as monoxide. NO is nitrogen monoxide. So that is how we name our covalent bonds. In summary, remember, it is 2 non-metals. We only use this for non-metals. And when we do it, when we name the first one, we just name it as is. If there's more than 1, we throw on a prefix. For the second element, you have to change the ending to "ide," and you always have to add a prefix. And the prefix is our 1 mono, 2 di, 3 tri, 4 tetra, 5 penta. That kind of summarizes how we name covalent bonds. This is Mr. Clinner, and I'm signing off.